The Reformers' Wall in Geneva was built in 1909 to commemorate the 400th anniversary of John Calvin's birth and the 350th anniversary of the Academy. This monument intends to show that the foundation of the Reformation is in education. The motto that's inscribed on the wall is "After darkness, light." You'll notice as you look at the scene in the picture here that smaller statues on the right and on the left flank four central reformers: William Farel, John Calvin, Theodore Beza, and John Knox. What you may not be aware of, however, is that there is only one woman's name inscribed on the wall, the name of Marie Dentière, but no monument stands tall to honor her contributions to the Reformation or her work in the city of Geneva. In 2017, Reformed Christians celebrated the 500th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation, remembering the date that Martin Luther tacked 95 theses on the door to a church of Wittenberg. Around that time, a pastor asked me about the contributions of women to the Protestant Reformation. The question made me very aware of the deep need for resources that help us expand the narrative with regard to the Protestant Reformation. But one of the issues for women is that they were often serving in convents as nuns or as sisters, and they had an opportunity to reflect and to study the biblical text where they would be free from responsibilities to their family members. When they left the convent, there were more limited roles for women in religious leadership. One of the stories that's important to remember is the story of Katherine von Bora. Katherine von Bora was first a nun, and she was actually smuggled out of her convent in a fish barrel. She was also a significant leader. She became a leader in the Black Cloister, which was their home in Wittenberg. And while she was there, not only did she welcome refugees from religious wars, but she also became known for some of the kinds of foods that she prepared. One of the things that she's remembered for by historians is that she was an excellent brewer of beer. Another story that I think is important for us to encounter is the story of Marie Dentière. Marie Dentière is likely the first theologian who was a woman during the Protestant Reformation. She wrote an early book in French grammar, and she also was well known for her writing to a queen, the Queen of Navarre, as she was trying to encourage the city to take back in people who had been exiled. She made her defense, particularly for women's right to preach, on the basis of the biblical text in the style of Reformed theology. Note that many women are named and praised in the Holy Scripture, not only for their good morals, deeds, bearing, and example, but for their faith and doctrine, like Sarah and Rebecca, and principally among all the others of the Old Testament, the mother of Moses, who, notwithstanding the edict of the king, protected her son from death and caused him to be reared in the house of the Pharaoh, as is fully described in Exodus 2. Deborah, who judged the people of Israel in the time of the judges, is not to be scorned. I ask, would it be necessary to condemn Ruth, given the fact that she is of the feminine sex because of the story that is written about her in her book? I do not think so. She is rightly numbered in the genealogy of Jesus Christ. The Queen of Sheba had such wisdom that she's not only named in the Old Testament, but Jesus also named her among the sages. If it is a question of speaking of the graces which have been given to women, what greater grace was given to any creature on the earth than that given to the Virgin Mary, Mother of Jesus, to have borne the Son of God? Ah, it would be too impudent to hide the talent which God has given to us. We ought to have the grace to persevere to the end. Amen.
My name is Dr. David Daniels. I am the Henry Winters Luce Professor of World Christianity at McCormick Theological Seminary in Chicago. And I teach the history of Christianity at McCormick, and my major area is 1453 to the present. One of the things is that I seek to try to find out how do we describe Christianity as a world movement, bring a global perspective of Christianity. And by that, I mean, how do we understand how people in Asia or Africa, for instance, impacted Christianity in Europe? And conversely, how did Christianity in Latin America impact Christianity in Asia? So I'm looking to shift things around so it is not merely a focus on how the West impacts the rest, as some people frame it, or how Europe shapes Christianity around the world. So how do we tell another story? How do we expand the narrative? One of the areas that the narrative needs to be expanded is around how do we include women in the story? Not just insert them, but to show how women actually are playing critical roles in shaping Christianity. So one of the first things I do is not only look at people from the so-called global South, Asia, Africa, Latin America, on their respective continents, but maybe shift to say, how do they live within Europe, for instance, to give a different location to this discussion. So the first Protestant of color that I have found that is named, or at least among the first, is a woman by the name of Mary Phyllis. She's from Africa, her parents are from Africa, she's African descent. But in the 1580s, she relocates to London, England. I'm unclear of how she gets there, but my understanding is her father is there too. Her mother, the mention of her has not survived, so we don't know much about the mother. But the father's mentioned, he's mentioned by name. Mary Phyllis is born about 1577, so within about the age of 10, or even earlier, she lives in London. She begins to become a worker in the household of a woman who's a seamstress, a widowed woman, matter of fact. And so it's these two women working together, and I suppose that she is learning the trade of knowing how to sew and how to make garments and other items. And she expresses to the woman that she works for, her employer, that she wants to learn about Christianity. And then the woman somehow either teaches her herself or finds a place for her to learn. And so she learns about Christianity. And so at a certain point, when the woman thought that she was knowledgeable of Christianity, Mary Phyllis said that she wanted to be baptized. And so the woman then goes to her own pastor or rector and informs him. And he then interviews Mary Phyllis. Her answers are quite adequate, he says. She has a good comprehension of the faith. She knows some of the elements of the faith. And she gets baptized on her own volition, as we understand the situation. And she then becomes they're described as a lively member of the congregation. I'm not sure what that means, but clearly she's active in some kind of way.
When we study the Reformation of the 16th century, seldom we pay attention to the Reformation movement in Spain, or we dismiss its importance. But the Spain of the 15th and early 16th century was a religious breeding ground of new spiritual currents and ideas. Movement emerged at least 5 years earlier than Luther's Reform movement. Among this movement is worth noticing the Alumbrados movement. This was a mystical religious movement that took place mainly in the center of Castile around 1511. The Alumbrados met in small groups and personally read and interpreted the Bible, and they preferred silent prayer to vocal prayer. There were also groups of people filled with this sense of spirituality, but also with an evangelizing fervor. Therefore, when the Reform ideas of both Luther and Calvin arrived in Spain, they found an already fertile soil. Thus, those Reform principles were received and integrated into the emerging movement in Spain. Although the new ideas reached all over the Spanish territory, two main centers of the Reformation movement stand out: Valladolid and Sevilla. The followers of this movement formed small congregations and groups that met in houses and in convents and in monasteries. There they read the Bible and other writings of the Reformers. it is estimated that there were about 200 places of worship. A large majority of those converted to the Reformed faith were highly educated, many belonging to the aristocracy, and many priests, monks, and nuns. Interestingly, even though there was no structural unity, there is great dissemination of the Protestant ideas, establishing an exchange of Reformed writings, material like sermons, spiritual letters, biblical readings. Women were a very important part in this Reform movement. Although the Spanish society and church of the time were hierarchical, limiting and even preventing women's participation, women had an important role in the Reform movement of the 16th century. We can identify several women, mostly young, educated, belonging to high-ranking aristocratic and even nobility families. Through the autos of faith trials of the Court of the Holy Inquisition, it has been possible to have access to these women and their testimonies, or even we could say ministries. These women were actively involved, immersing themselves in the new ideas in various ways. Some opened their houses to study and comment on the Bible, the work of the Reformers, and even to have worship services.
Carmen, I find it painful that the stories of these women are recorded mainly in the notes of inquisitors, not in their own hand or by someone who is loving and caring for them. Can you say more about why they're remembered that way and not another way?
What is we know about these women mostly because of the Inquisition. So it's painful that we don't have the other materials. There may be other materials, but I haven't had access to those. But for the ones that I read through different sources, they point out about the auto de fe and the trials during the Inquisition, and that's how we know about their life and what they did. So what impacted me more, it was about some of them were very young women, and how they there to oh my God, it breaks now. They there to accept the new faith, and not only that, but share. So they were willing to learn. So that's how we find then that in the convents, the nuns they met, and they were women that came to the convents to hear the sermons, then to sit with the nuns to discuss these sermons. And so that's powerful. And some of these women that were taken to the Inquisition, they were just punished just for participating in those tertulias or in those conversations. And so that's very powerful for me, especially the fact that they were young, 21 years old, like Maria de Borges, a young woman, very intelligent, that she knew Hebrew, Latin. She read Calvin, and she was given the opportunity to retract, and she said no, and she died. She was burnt this day, 21 years old. So that gives you an idea of the courage of these women.
The first person that I would like to talk about is Mary of the House of Hapsburg. She was the wife of Louis II, the last Jagiellonian king in Hungary. She was the granddaughter of Emperor Maximilian, who was strategically married at age 17 to further the interests of the empire, meaning the hold on the Hungarian and Bohemian lands. But she, at that young age, used her immense power quite wisely and boldly, and has been a significant person in the history of the country. She was in Hungary at a very significant time. It was a turbulent time in Hungary as the Habsburgs were trying to expand eastward. Hungarians were trying to get rid of the Habsburg oppression while fending off the Turks coming from the east. Mary fulfilled her role as the queen in the Habsburg Empire by promoting the imperial cause, among other ways, by marrying some of her ladies-in-waiting to famous Hungarian nobles to make them support the cause of the empire. At the same time, she used incredible courage to build her own court and exercised quite some freedom in picking who was part of her court, and invited a lot of preachers and befriended powerful magnates from the area who were espousing new religious ideas. Her court became a hub of intellectual, theological, and artistic activities. Although she never formally converted to Lutheranism, probably because her role as a queen limited her explorations in religious convictions, she has been influential because she herself was quite versed with several works of Luther and had intense conversations with her court members about theological ideas. She was not afraid of challenging her brother, Ferdinand, the Archduke of the Empire, and correct his chaplain on theological matters. We know that she intervened in saving at least one person from being tortured and burned for their Lutheran beliefs in 1525. I think Mary really was a significant person in creating space for freedom of expression and exploring ideas. And one of the people that she really impacted was another woman, Katharina Pamflinger Katalin in Hungarian. She was one of Mary's ladies-in-waiting that she married to a Hungarian magnate, Bálint Török. And after the Battle of Mohács that devastated Hungary and had the Turks occupy 1/3 of the country, she and her father became ardent supporters of the Reformation. She relocated to Debrecen with her husband, the city that he received as a gift from the crown for his services. And there, because the husband was not very much engaged in religious matters, she took it as her task to turn Debrecen into a citadel of the Reformation. Like some other women, she also held a household where learning became the center of activities, and she would take on children of noble families and educate them in the most current ideas, both religious and humanistic. One of her critiques called her Leona Lutheriana, Lutheran lioness, because of her fierceness and determination to promote the Reformation, the cause of Reformation. I mean, who I spoke of, like Katharina Pamflinger, she was called a lioness, Lutheran lioness, because of her fierceness and persistence in championing the cause. And then also Zsuzsanna Lorántffy in the 17th century. When she wrote her first book, then she was called all kinds of names and caricatured in the pamphlet because it was such an offense. But she just went on to do her things.
Yeah, that reminds me about Leon de Vivero. She was, the inquisitor referred to her as the matriarch of the heretics. So this woman must have been very, very bold, and maybe she had attracted other people, so that the inquisitor called her the matriarch of heretics. She must have been something, so that's the same as that same as the lioness. So this is it's impressive how they perceive how the other perceives the power of these women, and that's very important for us to say.
Ana Enriquez de Rojas, a 24-year-old daughter of the Marquis of Alcañices, who continually read the writings of the Reformer, especially Calvin. Isabel Estrada, Juana Velázquez, Juana de Silva, natural daughter of the Marquis of Montemayor, Catalina Ortega, Beatriz de Carcella, Leonor de Cisneros, Francisca Zúñiga, Beatriz Vivero, and Catalina Ortega, daughter-in-law of the prosecutor of the Council of Castile, also participated. On May 21st, 1559, an auto de fe was held. A total of 31 persons were presented. In it, the following women were convicted. Mencía de Figueroa, convicted to San Benito, life imprisonment, and confiscation of property. Ana Enriquez de Rojas, she knew Latin. She had read the writings of Calvin. She was sentenced to seclusion in a convent. Beatriz Vivero Casalla, confiscation of property, released to the secular justice. Constanza de Vivero, San Benito, life imprisonment and confiscation of property. Francisca de Zúñiga, prison and perpetual San Benito. Isabel de Estrada, death to garrote. Catherine Roman, death to garrote. Juana Velázquez, garrote. Isabel de Estrada, confiscation of property, perpetual prison and San Benito. Leonor de Toro, confiscation of property, San Benito and perpetual prison. Catalina Ortega garrote. In that same auto de fe, the following women were burned at the stake. Beatriz Vivero, Constanza Vivero, Catalina Ortega, Catalina Román, Isabel Estrada, Juana Velázquez.